So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Jeremy Hunt will undermine Brexit by surrendering tax rights, warns Tory MPs. And this article was so funny, it made me laugh, genuinely made me laugh. So Jeremy Hunt has been accused of undermining Brexit by agreeing to international corporation tax rules as he faces a fresh backlash rebellion ahead of the budget. So obviously the budget it's still yet to go through, but they are very angry about some of the dumbest things I've ever read. This is about setting a minimum corporation tax. Countries are looking for an international agreement to set the floor at 15% corporation tax. At the moment, the UK's is 19%, but it's going to go up to 25%, and there's some Tories and even Labour MPs crying about it. A group of prominent Conservative MPs, led by former Prime Minister Liz Truss and ex-Cabinet Minister Priti Patel, have warned the Chancellor not to, quote, rush ahead and surrender sovereign tax rights, end quote. This about the OECD agreement, and it's funny they're saying the UK is surrendering tax rights when the UK's rate has never been at the 15% mark, 1.5. The OECD agreement is about an effective 15% rate, so it would mean once the tax exemptions are all done, the corporation tax rate has to be at 15%, should not go below that, so no like super deduction and things like that. That's how I've read it anyways, and I think it's an agreement we can leave if we wanted to, like how the US left the Paris Climate Accord, like with no consequences. In a letter to the Chancellor, the MPs are urging him to pull out of an international agreement that corporation tax rate should never be reduced below 15%. They point out that there was little point withdrawing from the EU if the government was going to ratify the agreement brokered last year by the, Paris-based Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Oh no, it's based in Paris. What if it was based in London? They would be okay with it, right? Brexit has nothing to do with the tax rate. The only thing you can argue about is VAT. Ireland's corporation tax rate is 12.5%, which is lower than the 15% rate. And Ireland is one of the countries that isn't favouring this OECD agreement. If we want to lower our rates, we could have done that whilst being a member of the EU. We could have had 10% if we wanted to. I've also seen Mog complain about the OECD because it's based in Paris. He said something on the lines of, we did not take back control from Brussels to give it away to Paris. Now, Mog, the OECD is a forum and it's not run by the French government. I know Brexiteers struggle to understand things, but it's about setting a minimum floor for corporation tax rates. I know Brexiteers don't understand minimum standards, and their letter reads like this, quote, as a party elected to ensure Britain takes back control from the EU, it is remarkable that we should be asked to rush ahead and surrender sovereign tax rights under the OECD initiative, especially while so many questions about the measure remain unaddressed, they say. We are united in our belief that we risk doing damage to the UK's economic competitiveness by pressing ahead with the current implementation deadline or timeline. The letter, which is also signed by Greg Smith MP, Stephen Hammond MP, points out that other countries are dragging their feet when it comes to implementing the 15% corporation tax floor. So how does the agreement damage us when it just sets a floor, especially when the UK has not had a 15% corporation tax rate? Yes, other countries are delaying on this, but that just means the UK won't be impacted until everyone agrees. It's not like the UK is going to rush into this agreement saying, yes, we will not go below 15% effective tax rate, and then other countries are like, we'll see about that, dog. No, it's when all the OECD countries agree to it, that's when it's going to be implemented. The Chancellor has been warned by leading figures in the insurance industry that pushing ahead with the corporation tax floor ahead of other countries will have major impacts on the UK's competitiveness. And no one's saying we should jump the gun here and implement it before everyone else does. Now, how will it impact our competitiveness if that's the case? We are competing with other G7 countries and other G7 and European countries. We're not competing with the Cayman Islands. We're not competing with Singapore. Perhaps some of these insurance companies operate, say, within the British Virgin Islands or other such tax havens. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they could be against this. 3 former Chancellors, Lord Hammond, Kwasi Kwarteng and George Osborne, have warned that pressing ahead with a rising corporation tax rate would be a mistake. A Treasury source said, however, quote, UK sovereignty is not undermined. Our corporation tax rate is still the lowest in the G7, and important tax levers that boost investment are not part of the global minimum rate. Even after the corporation tax rise this April, we'll have the lowest headline rate in the G7. Only 10% of companies will pay the full 25% rate, but even at 19%, our corporation tax regime did not incentivize investment as effectively as countries with a higher headline rate. So a headline rate is the amount you're meant to pay, but there are also deductions and things like that. The UK had a super deduction during the pandemic, for example. And so what I found really interesting is that Sunak committed to the rise when he was Chancellor last year, but also that they admitted that having the lower 19% rate did not get the UK more investment. That's a big admission from Sunak and Hunt, and goes to show you that just cutting taxes does not always solve everything. Stares at Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. Here's the G7 tax rate. So the UK's one will be pushed to 25%. You've got France on about 26, the USA on 26, those freedom-loving capitalists are about the 26 mark, Canada 26, Italy are about 28, Japan are about 30, I'm going to say that's about 30, and Germany are 30. Are the socialist countries with their higher tax rates of, checks notes, slightly between the 25 and 30% figure. We're still going to have the lowest tax rate in the G7, and yet they're crying about this. I mean, this is madness. This is absolute madness. Obviously, these countries have things like deductions and other things which really help. That's why the UK kept mentioning the headline rate and saying that a lot of the companies won't even be paying the 25% tax rate. It'll just be a few of them. I think they said only 10% of companies will actually pay the full rate because they have two or three different main tax bands for corporation tax rate. I've mentioned before how I'd want it to be reformed, but it doesn't really matter in the context of this conversation. It just matters that people have kind of failed to understand what the OECD are kind of proposing. Failed to understand that the UK hasn't had below 15% corporation tax rate, at least not that I could find anyways, and failed to understand that it's not just about corporation tax rate, why countries would want to set up shop where you are. Maybe for these Brexiteers who want just loads of service style companies that want to pay as the lowest possible tax they could ever pay, or just set up kind of brass plates in the country. Maybe that's what they want, but when you look at the G7, these are the major rivals here in terms of economic scale. You've got France, who's higher, USA, every other G7 member is higher than us. So it's clearly not just down to things like corporation tax rate, it's other things. And you had the Treasury basically admit, Sunak and Hunt basically admit that having the 19% corporation tax rate didn't bring the investment the country needed, and that's a big admission in my opinion. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.